What celebrity did bad things but everyone forgot what they did because they're famous? Dr. Seuss was having an affair while his wife was battling depression and cancer. When she committed suicide, she left him a note that said, "Dear Ted, what has happened to us? I don't know. I feel myself in a spiral, going down down down, into a black hole from which there is no escape, no brightness. And loud in my ears from every side I hear, failure, failure, failure. I love you so much, I am too old and enmeshed in everything you do and are, that I cannot conceive of life without you. My going will leave quite a rumor, but you can say I was overworked and overwrought. Your reputation with your friends and fans will not be harmed. Sometimes think of the fun we had all through the years." And the person he had the affair with would become his second wife. Boy George. He beat a guy with a metal chain after cuffing him to a radiator. Should make for an interesting sequence in his forthcoming biopic. Steven Tyler became the guardian for a 16-year-old he was dating when he was 25 so he could bring her on tour, knocked her up too. There was a groupie called Laurie Maddox who Jimmy Page started dating when she was 14. David Bowie took her virginity when she was 15, and Mick Jagger gave her cocaine and slept with her while she was still underage. You never hear about any of this. George Wallace, the infamous pro-segregation governor of Alabama in the 60s, did not inform his wife that her doctor diagnosed her with cancer. Doctors during this time often told patients' relatives of their cancer diagnosis instead of the patient, especially if the patient was female. The reason was that she was running for governor as a surrogate for him since he had reached his term limits and he thought that the diagnosis would negatively affect her chances of winning. She ended up finding out about it 4 years later during a visit to a gynecologist, but unfortunately the cancer had progressed to the point that she died from it 3 years after learning that she had cancer and that her husband had known about it. He ended up successfully getting the term limits repealed and went on to serve a few more terms as governor. People forget about this, I'm assuming, because of all of the other crappy things he did. Edit, her name was Lurleen Wallace, for those interested. NBA Hall of Famer Karl Malone raped a 12-13-year-old. And then denied that the kids were his and refused to pay any child support. Karl Malone is one of the biggest pieces of crap there is, and he's still treated like a god by the Utah fan base. In my country there is a TV host that killed several people in a car accident. Twice. It was his fault both times. You can still see him on TV. I'm from Romania and I'm pretty sure the op is as well. I believe he is talking about Serban Wedu. He killed 3 people in a car accident that was his fault. Rick James kidnapped 2 women with his wife while on separate crack binges. Tom Cruise is the celebrity face for a massive cult that kidnaps, rapes, and is likely involved in human trafficking and child marriages. The cult that outlawed the IRS. But yeah, Mission Impossible was cool, I guess. It's honestly so terrifying. If anyone wants to look this up, look up Leah Remini. She openly talks about what happened while she was in the cult and actually has stories of Tom Cruise and being a celebrity in Scientology. Charlie Sheen once had unprotected sex with his girlfriends, plural, when he has HIV. Yeah, he's a coked-out party animal and all the bad that comes with that. He's never really tried to hide the fact that he's a bad person like that. I'm surprised the media never came down on him harder for it, but here we are. Having unprotected sex when he has HIV is an order of magnitude worse than his silly coked-out party animal antics. Is no one gonna mention Caitlyn Jenner hitting that pregnant woman and forcing her into traffic? Then getting the Woman of the Year award? I guess I remembered that wrong. Turns out it was an elderly woman. And the woman died when she was hit by a Hummer. Also, remember that Brendan Schaub, the millionaire podcaster/comedian, spit in someone's face and then threw them through a sliding glass door because they asked him to stop eating his food. Look into it. On an episode of the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, comedian Nikki Glazer talked about the recent Comedy Central Alec Baldwin roast in which Caitlyn Jenner participated. Nikki had planned to roast Jenner with a bunch of jokes about how Jenner had killed someone, but Jenner refused to participate in the roast if those jokes were made. Jared Leto's been accused of rape by half a dozen 13 to 15 years old girls. 100% believe that. At 14 years old I grew up in a house for teenage girls that have experienced trauma, and we met some real famous people sometimes. The house was near LA, that would volunteer. He met us at the girls' home one time to promote his band and then had the home bring us to his home to record in his studio. He gave us a tour of his house and there were so many inappropriate things he could/should have put away knowing there were underage girls coming. It's almost like he wanted us to see it and gauge how some reacted to the sexually inappropriate things. He also was extremely inappropriate, basically flirtatious with some of the young girls. Weird pedo vibes definitely. Mark Wahlberg beat and blinded a Vietnamese guy just because he was Vietnamese. I can't believe it took me this long scrolling to find this. He's making millions off the Transformers films and everyone conveniently has forgotten that he committed a hate crime. Emma Roberts beat the shit out of her then boyfriend Evan Peters, then continued to co-star in the same show as him. I was looking for this. She left Evan Peters with a bloodied nose and bite marks after some people called the cops on them when they had a fight in their hotel room in Canada. I'm saying this as a woman. It says a lot about how obvious the abuse is that when the cops turn up to a domestic violence case and arrest the woman instead of the man. They continued to date until early this year. Maybe she changed, but if I'm completely honest, I just feel relieved on Evan Peters' behalf. This one always bothered me. She bit his face. They stayed together, and did the show, but nobody seemed to think the domestic violence was a big deal just because Peters didn't leave her. Piers Morgan was the editor of the Daily Mirror during the Iraq War, published photos that he knew were fake of American and British troops abusing Iraqi prisoners. He was fired but somehow managed to make a successful media career out of it. Andy Dick has sexually assaulted people an absurd amount of times and also got Phil Hartman's wife back into drugs, which led to her murdering Hartman in an intoxicated state. You would think he would have been ruined in the #MeToo movement. But apparently we pass it off like that's classic Andy Dick. Edit, to those saying Andy Dick doesn't really get a pass because everyone hates him, he's not in prison, which is where anyone else would end up for doing half the things he did. So I'd call that a huge pass. Tim Allen got caught in an airport with 1.5 pounds of cocaine and gave up his connections, so he only did 3 years instead of life. Yay. He wasn't famous then. So no celebrity power or money. I think you'll know the song Despacito, who is performed by Luis Fonsi. Well, this little piece of shit was married to a beautiful woman who had breast cancer. During her entire process of chemo he wasn't there, and he even told her, when she had a breast removed, that he didn't want her as a woman. This ended up in a divorce. Jerry Seinfeld dated a 17-year-old girl in high school, when he was 39 years old. Same as Paul Walker dating a 16-year-old when he was 33. Steven Tyler was a serial rapist in the 70s and 80s. Now he's an old woman. He also became the legal guardian of a 14-year-old groupie so he could take her on tour and fuck her. Not sure what her parents were thinking. There was that time James Franco tried to sleep with a teenager. After she posted the exchange on social media of her telling him how old she was and him not caring and still wanting to see her, all he had to do was go on a few morning talk shows a couple days later and say, You don't always know who you're talking to online, and everyone instantly forgot about it. He framed it like he was the one who was deceived and people just let it slide even though that clearly wasn't the case. He's getting sued for his sham of an acting school that he used to prey on aspiring actresses. It's a little more recent, so hard to say how it will affect his career. John Hamm led a fraternity pledge around the house by a claw hammer around his testicles while other frat members beat him so hard his spine was fractured and he nearly lost a kidney. Hamm later referred to it as a bummer of a thing that happened. I hate this, not just because he hurt someone, but because it was so humiliating, and shows an utter disregard for other people. The craziest part is that Sigma Nu, the fraternity he was part of, literally started because the founders thought men could be taught how to better their lives without physical hazing. Marcos Alonso, football player for Chelsea FC, was driving drunk and killed a 22-year-old woman. Driving 70 miles per hour in a 30 miles per hour zone with an alcohol level of 0.93 milligrams. His final punishment was a $67,000 fine and a driving ban of 40 months. He was driving drunk and crashed into a stone wall. The woman who was killed was his girlfriend who was a passenger in his car. Gwyneth Paltrow. She's a con artist and manages a MLM, as well as recommending women treat their illness by putting rocks up their vagina and steaming their privates, causing harm to people. You can say she's an idiot. Or just that she's a sociopath that loves making money off hurting other people. Ariana Grande. She went to a donut shop in the middle of the night, licked the donuts when the worker was busy doing something and was distracted, and got the person fired. I'm still salty because I used to get donuts there all the time in high school. Not to mention, who does that? We forgot how crappy it was, but think about the sort of person who would do that. Ben Roethlisberger. Everyone somehow forgets that he raped 2 people. I didn't. Fun fact, the 2 state troopers who guarded the bathroom while he raped that girl were promptly fired. But, hey. Football, am I right? Pittsburgh was more up in arms over the Steelers signing Mike Vick than Ben raping people. Super Bowl wins forgive all.